I supposed to do with my life? I don't know. What am I supposed to do? Do your teachers or your parents ever ask you, or they're in the consistent habit of asking you, so, have you decided what you're going to do at uni? Have you decided what you're going to study? Have you guys heard that more than once? Okay? How many times have your parents asked you that in the last 3 months? So what are you going to do? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Maybe you had a recent family gathering or family reunion, and like all the aunts and uncles and the friends, like, so what are you doing with your life? You know, and they're like, how are your grades? And they're just evaluating you, trying to figure out what you're going to do. Well, there's a lot of options. There's a lot of things you could do. The world is full of ideologies competing for your attention and competing for your allegiance. There are companies that spend billions of pounds just to get you to buy something. That's what Facebook adverts are. That's what YouTube's. You know that little click on the YouTube advert? Skip this, skip that, wait 5 seconds. That's for you! Because they want your allegiance. I hate those things. So annoying. You know what I'm talking about when you're going through you're playing your music from YouTube. So, what is an ideology? Alright? This is the dictionary.com definition of an ideology. The body of doctrine, myth, belief, etc. that guides an individual or social movement, an institution, class, or a large group. There are different ideologies that are out there that are trying to grab your attention. Now, these ideologies eventually will determine who you're going to be, what you're going to do, what kind of stuff you're going to buy into, what social class you're going to be a part of, if there are social classes. You know, I really want to define that. But they have something to do with the major questions we ask in life. Now, I want to ask you guys a couple questions. Do these questions sound similar? Who are you going to marry? Have you thought about that? Have you seriously thought about it? I know that girl you're thinking about. No? Might be a couple more years. Might be a couple more years. That's the same kind of question as, where are you going to live in 30 years? Where are you going to live? Have you thought about that? You need to think about that, right? That's the same kind of question as, what are you going to do with your life? You ever get tired of hearing that? It is. I hear often from my students, they get tired of hearing that thing over and over and over again. Well, the reason they ask that is they want to figure out where you're going to be, what you're going to do, what you're going to achieve. Now, along the way, certain ideologies, they say, you should do this, you should be this. Now, here's a couple examples of some ideologies. Democracy, capitalism, materialism, morality. Now, for example, let's say, the first one, democracy. I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to talk to your neighbor. For democracy, would you rather be a part of a democracy where they never elect the person you like, and they never elect the people that you think should be in power? That was just right. Or would you rather be a part of a communist dictatorship or a communist system where you're really good friends with the leader and you agree with everything they do? What would you do? Would you rather be a part of a democracy where they never elect the person you want, even though you vote for them, you put lots of money, you like throw your life savings into their funds, they can win, but they just never win, and the government never does anything they want? Or you're best friends with chairman, what's his name, from North Korea, or whatever happens to be. Okay, talk to your friend. What would you rather do? All right, so let's hear some answers. What would you do? What would you do? Somebody raise your hand. What would it be? Democracy or communism? Oh, not so brave, no. Come on. Let's hear somebody.
Communism.
Communism. Why?
I don't know.
Because I'm best friends with the guy in charge, man. I get a nice place. Alright. Anybody else? That's a tough one. What would you do? Yeah.
Communism, because it'd be easier to become the person who is in charge after your friend died.
Ah, right. You might take over for you, buddy. Take care of him, okay? Second question, and this question actually has to do with morality. What if you made all the right decisions? You did all kinds of good things. You started charities. You were able to do all kinds of things for the poor. And you know what? Your family benefited in many different ways, but no one ever knew you did it. You got zero credit. Would you rather do that? Or would you rather be able to get away with anything? and never get caught. Talk to your friend, 30 seconds. Whatever it happens to be. That's the funny thing. The funny thing, these are different competing ideologies, and each one of them has their own problems. And hopefully, in sixth form, you're going to debate some of these things, some of these things that happen. Now, at a certain point, I was thinking this morning, what's this like? It's like all these ideologies and things compete for my attention, like bubbles. It's like a bubble bath, right? They have little bubbles, and the bubbles rise. Some bubbles rise higher than others. Democracy is more important than capitalism. Capitalism is more important than morality. Materialism, well, heck, that's like the bigger bubble that encompasses them all. Or, for example, democracy, that's basically saying the majority wins. But the problem with this is, even though the majority wins, what happens if the majority is wrong? What if they vote like to kill people? That would be bad. What's the problem with that? Capitalism basically says, I have the right to buy bread at the lowest cost possible. And people can compete to make cheaper bread. That's capitalism. Morality basically says, there is right and wrong, no matter what you think. When anyone thinks, there's right and wrong. And you have to deal with that. Materialism basically says, and it's partially brought up by the scientific establishment over the last 400 years, scientific method and inquiry is awesome. Materialism within science, that can be a problem. Materialism says, the only thing that exists is what I can observe or measure. There is nothing that exists that is not material. So, here's some of the problems with it. When these bubbles start to collide, capitalism, democracy, what's the problem? You can buy a prime minister. You can buy a president. Kind of nice. Put all their money in their fund. They have $1 billion to spend on their fund to get all the YouTube adverts out. The other guy has nothing. Or maybe you bankrupt the other candidates because you have so much money. Something like that. The problem when democracy and morality, when they interact, the majority wins, despite what's right and wrong. These bubbles are competing. They're going to compete in your mind. Morality and materialism. What happens when those come into contact? There's no room for God, angels, or even dreams. No absolute truth. And in fact, the very possibility that you are conscious right now is it's not a possibility. Science does not prove, materialism does not allow that possibility. It just is. So there's certain things when these bubbles come up and they're competing for your attention. And whatever bubble you decide to say, you know what, this is the big bubble, I'm going to take this one on board, I'm going to use my life to fight for it. There are going to be problems along the way. Now, these are just a couple bubbles, but eventually you would all like to think that there's one overarching bubble that holds them all together, that makes life make sense. And that would be called a worldview. Somewhere along the line, you're going to have to choose between a worldview. If you don't choose a worldview, you will choose by default. You will choose what your worldview is by default, and you won't even know about it. For example, there's this one girl, her name is Cady Davis. And Cady, as you can see, she's a pretty girl, right? She's American. She's only 26 now. But when she was 17, she was prom queen. You know what that means? It means you're pretty, and everyone knows it, and they voted for it, and they confirm it. Okay, that's pretty cool. In your high school. That's like the prettiest girl in school, basically. How do you vote for it? So she's prom queen. She's really smart. She had really good grades. She was highly thought of by her teachers and her friends and her parents. Her parents wanted her to go to university, but when she was 17, she actually went on a trip to Uganda, one of these high school missions trips. And she went down there, and the people of Uganda captured her heart. 2 years later, she said, I want to go back. This is 19 years old. Some of you guys are just below that right now. She decided to go back, and not just to go back for a little bit. Her parents were dead set against it. She actually didn't go to university. But she used her life, even in the short time she had, to do something significant. And these kids right here, these are actually all her adopted children. She looks about your age, actually. Maybe a few years older. She's like 20, 21 in this picture. 14 adoptees. What bubble was she working in? What vocation, what calling did she choose to go after? Was it democracy? Was it capitalism? What was it? I'm guessing it was love. I'm guessing it was Jesus. Now, a lot of times when we define what success is, because this girl, she obviously defines success something different than what I do. Something different than what you possibly do. Something different probably than most of our teachers would do. They'd say, hey, you need to go on and achieve good things. And sorry, I should have said that. Teachers, they're great. I didn't mean that, actually. Because teachers have great ideologies. But often people put this picture in front of us of what success happens to be. And we figure that when we get success, then I'll have security. Then I'll feel good about myself because I know that I've achieved something. You can stick your chest out and walk like this. Okay? Because you're proud. You're like, hey, I'm cool. And when you have security, then you have authority. I know who I am. I got security. People are going to listen to me now because I know what I'm talking about. Because I've achieved, right? Authority. Shh. Listen to me. That's authority, right? And we think because I have authority, now I have identity. I can stand and they can make a monolith in my name. Because I am Sky, or whatever. The problem with this comes when security doesn't actually work this way. There's a guy named Jesus, obviously you know who he was, and he didn't necessarily see life from that perspective. Let me go back to this one. He didn't see life from, first I achieve success, then I achieve security, then I get authority, then I get identity. He actually thought about the opposite direction. And where he got security from was not success. Jesus said, I don't accept praise from people. But how many of us here accept praise from people? And that's our definition of success. Partially. A lot of us want to be famous. I mean, that is the reigning kind of thing within pop culture right now, or within songs right now. You guys know that, the head song for the Olympics? I'm going to be the best. I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame. Remember that song? I can't remember. Anyway, there's a huge push to have security and success. Jesus did not seek security and success. He knew who he was. Second thing, we think, authority comes from security. Well, actually, authority comes first, and then you get security. Here's what Jesus said about authority. If I testify about myself, testimony is not true. There's another who testifies in my favor. I know that his testimony about me is true. I have a testimony weightier than that of John. For the word that the Father, God, has given me to finish, the very works that I'm doing, testify that the Father has sent me. When it comes to authority, your right to say something and people believe it, what gives you authority? It's just because I think I'm right? What higher appeal do you have to? What higher authority do you have to appeal to? Jesus had God to appeal to. Cady, what kind of authority? She obviously wasn't appealing to the authority of her parents. She wasn't appealing to the authority of the system that said go to university. You should definitely go to university, by the way. She wasn't appealing to that kind of authority. She was appealing to an authority that she believed in. Now, this is the same kind of authority that we can trust in. When it comes to success, Jesus did not have success in the eyes of everyone, obviously. He was an outlaw. He was beat up for what he said. Jesus. He was crucified. He was betrayed by his friends. Everyone left him, and for 3 days pretty much wanted to have nothing to do with him. But, you know what happened in the end? He rose from the dead. And today, you still know his name. In fact, this school still has his name posted everywhere. But he was not successful in the eyes of the world. When it comes to your vocation and calling, what you think you're supposed to do, how are you going to define it? Because this guy, Jesus, he defined it in a different way. Let me read you a couple things about his legacy. He was an outcast, yet his name is still known. His followers own over 85 buildings in Bath. His followers make up about 1/3 of the population of the earth. His people abolished slavery, responsible for the first book ever written. Discovered that the earth revolves around the sun. His people discovered penicillin. One of his people was the first to propose quantum theory. He inspired people to translate around 1,500 languages around the world. His people built and or occupy 3 of the top 5 most visited buildings and places in the UK. Around 159,000 people per year are murdered for being part of his community. There's more of his followers in China, probably, than in the United States and the UK combined. that makes us a minority, a very, very small minority. Martin Luther King Jr., Bach, Bob Marley, Denzel Washington, Mel Gibson are all in his following. In AD 100, there was one person who followed him for every 360 people on earth. Now, 2,000 years later, there's one person who follows him for every 7. He was not seen as successful in the eyes of the world, but yet God called him for something, wanted to use him for something. The last example I'm going to use is of this lady. You may recognize her. She wrote a book called The Hiding Place. Her name was Corrie ten Boom. She's born in the late 1800s, and in her life, she was like nothing special, man. She's just an old lady, right? She's normal. She wasn't educated. She didn't go to university. She actually didn't even have a decent job. She grew up running her father's shop, and as she ran her father's shop, I'm not sure if she had any kids or not, but nothing that she did was acceptable necessarily or seen as successful. But when the Nazis came, took over Europe, they came into Holland. She's Dutch. She ended up creating a place below her stairs or somewhere down there called the Hiding Place. And over the course of, I think, a year and a half, 2 years, she saved over 800 lives of Jews and other people. 800 Jews. After about 2.5 years, she was put in prison camps. Most of her family died, and she actually survived. Now, she was not seen as successful in the eyes of the world. She was not seen as someone to look up to necessarily. She even made it to age 40 or 42 with having done nothing significant in her life. But she is important, and she is significant because of what she achieved later in life. What if at this point in life, people are asking you all these things, what are you going to do? How are you going to be successful? What's going to be important to you? And you're like, oh, I got to achieve something with my life. I have to do something good or amazing. But you didn't do anything like that until you're like 40 or 50. People didn't even know her name until conditions arose which called forth her character, demanded of her something that she had but no one else knew she had. Her life was worth something. She was successful because of the security that she had, because of the authority that she had. As I finish up, just definitely want to make this point. We think that success leads to security, leads to authority, leads to identity, when actually it's the opposite way around. Identity, knowing who we are, what we've been called to do, what kind of person we want to become. Knowing that first. Who I am in God's eyes. Who Jesus has called me to be. Number 1, like Cady Davis. Number 2, that should give me a sense of, it doesn't matter what anybody says about me. I'm going to do what I think I'm supposed to do because of who I've been called to be. And once I'm secure, that gives me an authority to speak. You ever notice people with confidence? You kind of listen to them like, wow, they kind of know this figured out. Oh, okay. Because they know who they are. Most of the time. Security and authority. Where does your authority come from? And eventually, this will lead to success. The thing is, some of the success will be noticeable, and some of it won't. Some of you guys are going to do great things, and no one's ever going to know. It's just not going to happen. Your name's not going to be in lights. So my question for you, or my statement for you, as you're deciding what your vocation, what your calling is going to be, do you want it to be something that is popular on the outside, based on success, so then I feel good about myself, then people listen to me, and then I have identity? Or it's going to be the opposite way around. You're going to decide who you want, the kind of person you want to be. Decide who you want to be. And let success follow. God knows who He wants you to be. And He is the one who holds these kind of keys. So, as a Christian, here's a Christian. As a Christian, I would recommend trying to figure out everything you can about